And what I've been asked to talk is lung fibrosis, which is actually gripping the pulmonologist. And there may be more questions than answers as I go across. Evidence is not forthcoming, it is going to take some time. And what pulmonologists are doing, like me, is using our knowledge of respiratory medicine and utilizing in treating this pulmonary fibrosis. So forgive me if I am not able to show you a lot of references because there are none. So on 25th January 2021, I was delivering a lecture in API when we said that we are sitting on a time bomb. The Delhi was cruising, the North India was cruising, and April it actually burst. And we people working in the pulmonary critical care and medicine, we actually had a harrowing time in month of April and May, and we were, as it is, was struggling from the after effects of the first wave. Now, as the positivity rate is coming down, the vaccination is going up. And now we have vaccinated almost 30 crore dosages, but we have a big pool of cases who have recovered, which is more than 3 crore. Now, this is what we are talking today, and 3 crore are the ones which are actually diagnosed by RT-PCR or rapid antigen test. And you would all agree that actual number is much higher. It could be 3 times, 5 times. Anybody's guess because everybody is not diagnosed. So, what we are discussing today, how many would develop pulmonary complications? Dr. Maheshwar has described the mechanism and pathogenesis, which only he can describe so well. So, my job is to talk about lung fibrosis. So I'll be in next 25-30 minutes, I'll be just talking about the lung involvement, not infections, which have already been covered, but the lung fibrosis. Now, this is the autopsy report of from Italy and Germany. The unfortunate people who died, who underwent autopsy, you can see fibrosed lung, and there was fibrin thrombi indicative of coagulopathy in small arterial vessels of some of the patients. So this inflammation due to COVID was different from the other inflammation, that there was coagulation in the small vessel along with other inflammation which have been described. So how the lung fibrosis develops? There's an acute phase which lasts for 7 to 10 days where there's a diffuse alveolar damage. At the same time, the fibrous tissue could be detected in alveolar spaces as early as 7 to 10 days. The organizing phase, that is 10 to 14 days, that fibrous organization including fibroblastic proliferation and type 2 pneumocyte hypoplasia takes place. And late phase, that is after 2 to 3 weeks, the lung exhibits dense septal and alveolar fibrosis. So therefore, the fibrosis doesn't take long as far as the COVID is concerned. And physiologically, 47% of the patients who recover have impaired DLCO, that is diffusion capacity for carbon monoxide. 25% have reduction in the lung capacity, forced vital capacity, and long-term follow-up is definitely required. And who is likely to develop pulmonary fibrosis? People with advanced age, that with severe illness, those with prolonged ICU stay and requiring mechanical ventilation, smokers and chronic alcoholism, those who have had a very high CRP and IL-6, and it is too soon to determine which patient with COVID-19 are at greater risk of developing pulmonary abnormality. I will not spend a lot of time in the pathogenesis, but there is actually, as I said, initially there is the inflammation, there is alveolar epithelial damage, there is overexpression of pro-inflammatory cytokines, that is TGF beta and TNF alpha and IL-6, leading to the fibroblast and myofibroblast activation and leading to excess deposition of collagen in extracellular matrix. So this is the gross mechanism of how the fibrosis develops. And if you want to see it radiologically, this is the inflammatory stage when you see a lot of ground glassing that you see. The inflammation increases, the second stage, the third stage, the fibrosis sets in. You can see the reticular shadow, still the ground glassing is there. And finally, there's a development of bronchiectasis, which I'll be showing as I go. So I'll start my sort of further presentation with few cases, and I will try to make it case based. So this is during the first phase. 47-year-old known diabetic presented with fever and breathlessness for a period of 10 days. He had SpO2 of 78%. He was on high flow oxygen. ABG showed PaO2 of 62 on oxygen, and the provisional diagnosis was severe acute respiratory illness, but PCR was positive, so diagnosis was established. He had low lymphocyte counts. Its CRP was 97, LDH was 486, ferritin was 844. And this was the initial CT that we did as he got admitted. You can see the ground glass opacities in the periphery. Classical. In those days, we were not so well informed. Today, if anybody is seeing this CT will say, oh, this is nothing but COVID. So he was treated with oxygen support, received remdesivir, received steroid. At that time, plasma therapy was also standard of care. Gradually improved, shifted to the ward on oxygen support. On 14th day, the PCR became negative, and he was discharged. Now, 7 days later, he came to emergency department with complaints of severe breathlessness and ghabrat. He was afebrile though. His pulse rate was 160 with respiratory rate of 30. His SpO2 of 85% and PaO2 of 50 on room air, and this was a CT scan. You can see the dilated bronchi. You can see a picture which is showing some fibrotic strands, some empty areas. And this was, as I said, this is during the first wave. So we actually were not sure what was happening. So repeat CT chest was done. And then on the third day, he became further deteriorated and he developed pneumothorax, as you see. So a pigtail catheter was put in and lung expanded. As you can see, the lung is expanded, but still lung is unhealthy. And pigtail was removed after 5 days. After 6, then he was discharged. After 6 weeks from the discharge on oxygen support, this is kind of CT he had. And you can see classical fibrotic lesions. The ground glass opacities have been replaced with fibrosis. So this is what is sinister, and this is what we are going to discuss. So how do you assess this patient with post-COVID pulmonary fibrosis? Not everybody is that severe as this, but some people after recovery, they come back with breathlessness. So the assessment of these patients is done by pulmonary function, by 6-minute walk test, and by diffusion capacity of carbon monoxide, which I'll come to it later. But how do I treat them? I would treat them with, should I treat them with corticosteroids? Should I treat them with anticoagulant? Should I give them antifibrotic medication like pirfenidone and nintedanib? Is there a role of physiotherapy and rehabilitation? Now, as I said in the beginning, the evidence is not there. There's no evidence that corticosteroid reduce fibrosis. There's no evidence that anticoagulation would help, and there's no evidence, no randomized trial to show that with antifibrotic help. But we can't be sitting. We need to treat the patient. And we have been learning in the last 15 months nothing other than COVID, trying to make a sense out of it. And whatever I have understood during this time, I'll share with you. So this is case 2. This is a 34 years old female, unmarried. She was obese, but no other comorbidity. On 26th April, that is day 1, she had fever, body ache, and PCR was positive, was admitted with low oxygen, received all treatment including remdesivir, steroid, and heparin. Discharged on 34th day on tapering doses of corticosteroids. On day 40, his her SpO2 was 93 on 2 to 3 liters. She was bedbound. She was actually using a diaper and was unable to go to the bathroom because of hypoxemia and also severe proximal muscle weakness, most probably due to steroid induced. And this was a CT which was done while she was in hospital with a score of 25/25. And you can see a pneumomediastinum, which we are seeing very commonly. So when I saw her on online consults and this is another cut of the same CT scan. You can see the air bronchogram consolidation while she was in hospital requiring high flow oxygen with NRBM and also NIV. So on 40th day, her TLC was 10,600, CRP was still high, D-dimer was 2,050. So what is my choice? Should I continue steroids in tapering dosages? Should I continue with anticoagulant because the D-dimer is 2050? Should I add antifibrotic at this stage? By then her oxygen requirement had started coming down by 40th day. And so therefore I was a bit confused. So on 26th June, that is 62nd day, he was continuing on tapering dosages of steroids, 8 milligram of methylprednisolone at that time. She started going to washroom, but she had severe fatigue. She required oxygen only for going in the washroom. Her TLC was still high, D-dimer came down to 1230, CRP came to normal, ferritin was also normal. So I was happy. She was smiling, she could speak without breaking a sentence. And then on 75th day, to my pleasant surprise, she was able to come to OPD, was able to walk few steps. She had proximal muscle weakness. She had a SpO2 of 98% on room air. TLC was 10,000. D-dimer has come down to 940 and CRP has gone to 21. And when I did the CT, it was like this. Can you believe it? No antifibrotic. CT was only showed some ground glass opacity. And if you compare this CT with score of 25/25, this is a miracle from 16th May to 10th July. Tapering dosages of steroid, no anticoagulants, and she improves. There was another case which is 44 years old male who has history of fever, cough for 5 days, developed difficulty in breathing on 12th day, SpO2 was 91% with bilateral crepitation. This was the CT on 12th of May. This is second wave. This is not first wave. And you can see consolidation, dense consolidation. You can see air bronchogram. You can see some interstitial thickening. I can't be sure about that, but it's not ground glassing. It is a dense consolidation. So he received standard treatment. D-dimer was high. TLC was also high. But 1 month later, he had developed fibrosis. He was receiving steroids and nintedanib. You can see an air bronchogram here. You can see the interstitial thickening very clearly. And if I have enlarged it for you, this is the classical traction bronchiectasis that we see in these patients. And you can see the fibrotic strands all over. This patient was on steroids. This patient was on nintedanib. And now he is on only 1 liter of oxygen, no fever, is able to sit in bed. He is on 5 milligram of prednisolone and nintedanib. How long to continue nintedanib? We'll talk about it, but we don't have the answer. So I will show you radiology of some more cases to clarify my points. And this is another case of, he is the father of our nephrologist. He had COVID, 72 years old male, only hypertension. And anybody could think that this is fibrotic strands, as you can see. Ground glassing is also there, but we refrain from giving any antifibrotic drug. Of course, he received remdesivir, he received plasma, he required oxygen and everything. But his CT has cleared, he is able to walk for a kilometer now. only on tapering dosages of steroids. So I will also show you a radiology of some cases, and this is a signature X-ray for COVID today. If you see this kind of X-ray in a patient, it is only COVID and COVID. This is the inflammatory state, that is ground glassing that you see, where CRP is likely to be high, IL-6 is likely to high, there likely to be lymphopenia, ferritin is likely to high. This is a pulmonologist will get excited because you can actually see a lobule delineated, and anybody would think that probably this is going into the pulmonary fibrosis. But in my experience, these kind of patients are improving. There's no volume loss, there's ground glassing also, but so beautifully the lung architecture is seen because of the interstitial thickening. This is classical organizing pneumonia, as we see in other cases. This is a post-COVID case. Now, I come to the last part of my deliberation as to how do I manage post-COVID pulmonary fibrosis. Now, fibrosis is set in, so how do I manage it? Now, this is fibrotic NSIP, which is very difficult to treat, and this is, all pulmonologists know that this is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. As I said at the outset, that we do not have any randomized trial for treating pulmonary fibrosis secondary to COVID. We are utilizing our knowledge of treating idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis and fibrotic NSIP and other fibrotic interstitial lung diseases. So, when these patients come to us after, usually after discharge, they are on tapering doses of steroids, they are on oral anticoagulants. We call them after 4 to 6 weeks. We do not ask for a CT straight away. We are, if their resting SpO2 is more than 94, we subject them to pulmonary function test and DLCO along with 6-minute walk test. If these are deranged, we repeat as HRCT scan. If the resting SpO2 is less than 94, then we don't do this test and do a CT scan to assess for fibrosis. And I've already shown you the radiology of this various stages of lung involvement. Anybody who thinks that CT should not be used, but in COVID we have learned that especially for assessing the fibrosis, the X-ray doesn't help us. Somehow we have to depend upon low dose CT, where I have to use my discretion. If there's a young lady who is in childbearing age, I refrain from doing a CT, try to do without it. In elderly people, I don't worry about it. So, how do we treat interstitial lung disease, which are exemplified by interstitial fibrosis? Now, in 2000, we were using steroids with cytotoxic, cyclophosphamide, azathioprine, and anticoagulation. And actually, ATS guideline recommended a combination of steroid, and we have all treated ILDs with steroids right from last 20-25 years, and textbook of Murray and Fishman, they all mentioned it. 2005, Iphigenia trial came with high dose steroids, cytotoxic in neck. This was by Ganesh Raghu. Then came Panther trial, 2011, triple therapy arm of steroid, azathioprine and neck. And this was stopped due to side effects. Then came quite a bizarre thing like etanercept, bosentan, vasodilators, interferon, imatinib, did not work. Finally, what worked was pirfenidone with capacity 1 and 2 trial, and nintedanib with capacity 1 to 2 trial, and it came in 2014. I was there in the conference, American Thoracic Society. There was actually ecstasy. There was a jubilation for finding some evidence that pirfenidone and nintedanib works in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So pirfenidone is a TGF beta stimulator, and it prevents collagen synthesis. It has a side effect of rash and photosensitivity, nausea and dyspepsia. and it affects liver also. So you have to monitor the liver function. Diarrhea occurs in 26%. Dose is 40 milligram per kg. The maximum dose is 2,403 milligram, which is very difficult to achieve in practice. And it also has adverse effects. Now, what does Perfenidone do? That we must understand. It does not improve the lung condition. It actually reduces the decline in forced lung function, decreased forced vital capacity or death. So what it does is that in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, the forced vital capacity, that is lungs function, will decline anyway. But what Perfenidone does is, now this is Perfenidone and this is placebo. The placebo group, the lung function declines faster. In Perfenidone, it declines slower, which is statistically significant. So nobody should go with the idea that it improves the lung function. So similarly, nintedanib, both trials occurred. This is a tyrosine kinase receptor inhibitor with a smaller dose, that with adverse effects of diarrhea in 62%, which we actually have not seen in Indian patients, and vomiting and deranged LFT. It has a disadvantage that it can cause bleeding, so it should be given with care when you are giving anticoagulant, especially newer oral anticoagulant, apixaban and rivaroxaban. This trial also showed there is a diminished decline in lung function. And this was Impulse's one trial, and the difference was statistically significant, but mean difference was 125 milliliter in the forced vital capacity. Impulse's 2 trial was also similar, and it shows better result, and some of the arms showed delayed, some survival benefit also. So the mean difference was lesser, 93.7 ml. Now, this was about idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, but this is what you call it NSIP, which we all pulmonologists dread, because when these patients come to our OPD, they come that whatever, sir, you have given to us, we are not better. And so this is the fibrotic lung disease that we are talking about, the classical being in the progressive systemic sclerosis that we see. And what to do now? So the Sensis trial came in 2019, where nintedanib was used in all the fibrotic interstitial lung disease, be it hypersensitivity pneumonitis, be it collagen vascular related interstitial lung disease, and the result was the same. It was seen that nintedanib led to reduced decline in lung function significantly. So therefore, the thought process that when it reduces the fibrosis in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, it reduces the fibrosis in other fibrotic interstitial lung disease, why not use it in patients with COVID? Role of steroid in post-COVID. Steroids should be continued on discharge. If the CT scan shows significant GGOs, caution against the use of large doses of steroid. As I said, in my patient, there was a severe proximal myopathy, recommended using no more than 20 to 30 milligram prednisolone or equivalent. Now here I would like to point out that if you are using steroids in order to prevent fibrosis, pneumonia going into fibrosis, you can't be doing CT every third day. So therefore, you have to depend on patient's oxygen requirement. You have to depend on patient's inflammatory markers, namely CRP, D-dimer, and CBC, where lymphopenia is very common, and to some extent ferritin and LDL. My preference is CRP, D-dimer, CBC. So if they are high, along with oxygen requirement, along with other symptoms, along with patient feeling terribly unwell, use tapering dose of steroid. And I have used steroid sometime even for 40 days, 50 days, but in a smaller unconventional doses. Is there a role of anticoagulants, and how long? Now, this review has said that anticoagulants can be used for two purposes. One is that you want to prevent deep venous thrombosis or you want to treat pulmonary thromboembolism. That's not the subject of today. Today's subject is lung involvement and pulmonary fibrosis. And my thinking is that D-dimer, if in COVID, is a index of, is a parameter of COVID inflammation rather than thrombosis. But both are interchangeable because COVID inflammation involved microthrombi, as I said in the beginning. So therefore, there is a role of anticoagulants for how long? Giving low molecular heparin in the ICU or in the hospital setting is the standard of care. We all give newer oral anticoagulants, which could be apixaban or rivaroxaban at the time of discharge for a period of 10 to 14 days and then stop. The question is there a role of giving longer anticoagulants in patients who are at the risk of pulmonary fibrosis or if the D-dimer is high? There are no answers to that. But however, if the D-dimer is exceedingly high and your patient is having other rise in inflammatory markers, you may consider giving this newer oral anticoagulant for longer time, but this is absolutely anecdotal. So although no data specific to COVID is present, but up to 45 days of prophylaxis could be considered for low bleeding risk patients, elevated VT risk due to reduced mobility or comorbidities like active cancer. Now, for the prevention of fibrosis, I am not sure. But if the patient has diabetes, if the patient has CAD, patient has a risk factor for CAD, I also use sometimes low dose aspirin, but this is absolutely anecdotal. How do I follow them up? So the follow-up is not with CT scan all the time. You do a 6-minute walk test, very useful for assessment and follow-up. PFT, the vital capacity, is the most important parameter, and DLCO is better correlated with lung involvement. Is there a place of rehabilitation? There is no place like home. So you should go for healthy diet, frequent meals, and what about exercise? The breathing exercise are extremely important in preventing lung damage, out of which Anulom Vilom, Kapal Bharti, Bhastrika, and Brahmari. These 4 pranayam, to my mind, are the best for doing, besides incentive spirometry. And we at AIMS, we did a PhD thesis where yoga and asthma, it does improve the respiratory health and also mental health at times. About exercise, it is important to tell these people not to indulge into any kind of heavy exercise if you want to protect yourself from sudden death or arrhythmia or heart problems. So therefore, gentle exercises are recommended. No, don't go for heavy exercise. So ladies and gentlemen, my conclusion is that pulmonary fibrosis is a dreaded complication of COVID infection. Assessment is best done by oxygen requirement, PFT, DLCO, and 6-minute walk test, and at times by CT scan. Steroids have a role in early stages, especially when inflammation is documented and inflammatory markers are high. There is no role of long-term anticoagulants for fibrosis. After 45 days, there is absolutely no role of anticoagulant. Role of antifibrotic is being investigated. We are all using it in the benefit of the patient. I am aware of the 2 large trials being conducted, but results are not going to come soon. Nintedanib should be given with caution with the anticoagulant because there will be enhanced bleeding risk. You may have to reduce the dose of anticoagulant if you are using it together. I am not against antifibrotic, I am using it all the time. But I would say that use it judiciously and wherever indicated. With that, I thank you very much and I'll be